Hi, my name is Marc Warnke. People know me as the Goat Guy. So I want to talk about an important subject today about urinary calculi. It's such a misunderstood thing. I see such horrible advice constantly on all the Facebook groups and stuff like that, and it's confusing, I understand. But there is so much legend and lore and how to do that, and I just want to do a video clearing it up for you guys. Now, before I dive into that, I want to tell you, I'm going to dive deep into this subject because I think the goat community needs a clear and concise explanation of this. But our goal is to help to educate people how to raise goats better. We have a goat club membership that is absolutely an imperative if you are a newer goat owner. If you're a newer goat owner and you're watching this video because you had a goat that just got urinary calculi, those are the things that I teach about all the time on the Goat Club and in my courses. And when you're a Goat Club member, you get to watch videos of me once a week tending my herd of 41 milkers and breeders and packers and all that other stuff and all the things that happen with that. But you also get a live Q&A twice a month, and you can call me personally for 911 calls. Hey Mark, something's happening with my goat. I can't get the vet out here. What's your suggestion? That all comes as a part of that service, and you get half off on all the courses. So literally just with the half off on the courses, you can get a year of membership for free, and it's, you know, it's 20 bucks a month. It's not expensive comparatively to just one vet visit. So I'm going to go into this urinary calculi and teach you about it, but I highly recommend you go to PackGoats.com, you look at becoming a Goat Club member, and you get a couple of courses because you can get them for half price and start educating yourself and making yourself smarter at taking care of your goats, because they're a complex animal. They're difficult. Ranked the second hardest animal to raise on a homestead. So this is something that somebody needs to help you with. You need some mentorship, you need some education, and it's often very difficult and very expensive to find vets. So let's go into urinary calculi. Here's the largest misunderstanding that I find with urinary calculi. I constantly hear people saying, you can't feed them this and you can't feed them that. It is not about avoiding grain or avoiding alfalfa. It's not about that. It's a ratio. The ratio is 2 or 3 parts calcium and 1 part phosphorus. That's the proper ratio that you want to feed goats in. And there's actually 3 components to it. And the major factor why I see urinary calculi is the third component. The one component, again, is phosphorus. So things that are high in phosphorus, and you can go and Google all the feed choices and what their phosphorus to calcium ratios are. One thing that's traditionally very high in phosphorus is grain and grain type things. One thing that's very high in calcium is alfalfa. So alfalfa is very high in calcium. One that's balanced very nicely for goats is most grass hay. And you can test your hay. It's very easy. You send it into Ward Laboratories, you get a little bundle of it, you put it in a sack, and they'll test your hay for you. And then you can know if you're in that phosphorus to calcium ratio of 2 or 3 parts to 1 part. So it's really important that you understand it's a ratio. I get people that I'm helping and mentoring, and people just in the community that know that they can just reach out to me, and I'm always willing to be helpful, that will say, hey, I have a goat that's got urinary calculi, and then I walk them through this process. So I want to make sure that we speak about that, but first let me give you the foundational. So I'm trying to make a mental note to myself to make sure I speak to the phosphorus and calcium ratio, or what happens when you actually get it. Okay, so when we're trying to approach how to feed our thing, the third factor that's so important that you realize is water. And in my paying attention to helping people raise goats, that is the most consistent problem with developing urinary calculi that I'm seeing by far is your water. And why? Because a lot of us in homesteads and in rural areas are on wells, and a lot of our wells have hard water. And if you're developing water stains around your faucets or in your dishwasher or any of that sort of thing, that is almost always calcium. So I consistently, it is quite rare for me to counsel somebody who's dealing with urinary calculi that they have a phosphorus problem. It's almost always calcium. and I'm paying attention to their water, to their feed, and they're feeding well, but they've developed urinary calculi, it's calcium stones. I ask them if they develop hard water stains and whether they have hard water, and then their answer is yes, and holy mackerel, it's always consistently been the water source. So please, please, please test your water. And if you have hard water, you have to pull that out of the system. I don't suggest you try to nutritionally counteract it because, and so let me address that. So I don't suggest you nutritionally counteract it, which I'm going to show you here in a sec what I mean by that. I suggest you pull water out of the equation. You either draw from a different source that isn't high in calcium, or they make filtration systems that are capable, even on the end of a hose or those sorts of things, made for RVs, and that will help you with your water problem. So you need to change the water and then go to the system that I suggest, which is you just feed grass hay. You don't feed grain, you don't feed alfalfa, you just feed grass hay. Now, if you're a dairy person and you have does, remember they develop stones too, but they have a much larger urethra. So because they have a large urethra, you can get away with feeding does, which you should if they're milkers, a high alfalfa diet because they need the calcium and the higher protein to make milk and make babies. The primary sufferer is wethers. Now let's also talk about this mystery that I consistently see bad information on. Wethers need to be castrated, in my opinion, between 4 and 6 months. The urethra is at full development when they've had their first ejaculation. Their first ejaculation happens in 4 to 6 months, and it's usually with one another, boys being boys. Kind of gross, but it is. So the reality is once they have their first ejaculation, their urethra is as developed as it's going to be. So you want to make sure you wait to 4 to 6 months. A ton of people out there then will err on the side of caution and go longer, but then the consequence they suffer is trying to live with a ruddy buck for 3 or 4 more months. They stink, they get temperamental, they learn bad habits, and you won't want to pet them when they're pissing on their face every day and stink like a skunk. So I don't recommend you let them go that far. I recommend that at that 4 to 6 month mark, or when they start going into heavy ret, that's when you castrate. And the reason to do that is temperament, handling, working with you. You're not earning anything by being longer. So I don't suggest you go longer. So let's go back to the ratio. So why I said when you have high calcium water that I don't suggest you offset it nutritionally is that this is the part that people misunderstand. They say you can't feed that and you can't feed, it's not about that. It's about the ratio. So if you feed a lot of grain and you're developing phosphorus, you can actually offset that by feeding heavy calcium, which is alfalfa. So if you want to grow big babies, and people always say, oh my God, you can't feed a baby grain for the first year of their life. Yes, you can, as long as you feed it an appropriate amount of alfalfa. So if you feed the right amount of alfalfa to offset the phosphorus level in the grain that you're feeding, they'll do great because you're meeting the ratio. And the same vice versa. You actually could do the water. So let's say you have high water, you have calcium-rich water. You could actually offset that with grain. The problem is you would actually have to measure how much they drink every day. So that's why I suggest people don't try to offset their water nutritionally, because it's very difficult to figure out how much they're taking to try to offset with your grain. So I recently had a lady who very unusually developed a phosphorus stone. Now here's where we need to get into, if you happen to be a person who's watching this and you've just gone through that horrible circumstance, and I didn't explain this. What ends up happening in urinary calculi is they develop stones. The stones that go through the urethra of a male will either plug up, there's actually a little S curve inside of their urethra, and it's got a particular name, I can't remember it right now, and then the pizzle. The pizzle is at the very end of the penis, and it's like almost like a little straw. Those stones will plug up in that little S curve, or they'll plug up in the pizzle. And what will happen is that they won't be able to pee. Then what happens is the bladder expands to the point to where it becomes permeable. It basically becomes mesh. And then the urine will leak into their system, they'll go septic, and it takes a couple of days for them to die. It's awful. It's awful. So I highly recommend you don't ever have to go there, but I wanted to let you know what the process actually is and to understand urinary calculi better. And they develop two kinds of stones. They develop phosphorus stones and they develop calcium stones. If you have a goat go through that process, please do not bury him without finding out what kind of stones you developed, because that will help you to counteract your nutrition program or to mine out the problem. But if you have a goat that dies of urinary calculi and you bury him and you don't get the stones, then you're not going to know what to correct. And what you do is you just literally open their bladder, and there's going to be all kinds of stones in there. And those stones will either look like a copper BB and be very round, those are calcium, or they'll look like grains of sand and they're like more crystalline in look, and the crystalline is phosphorus. You can Google these images and see distinctly which stone you have, and you can also send it off for testing. So remember, if you're then developing a phosphorus stone like the lady that just called me recently, we're going to have to counteract nutritionally with calcium. Now here's the other X factor that makes it all really hard, is that some goats will genetically have a predisposition to just building stones. So that's another thing that I reminded her of is, okay, now we know we have phosphorus. What you need to do then, because it's likely if it is a nutritional problem, the other wethers that you have in your pen are also developing stones. And so you can look at them through an ultrasound or an x-ray and see if their bladder are full of stones. And you have to have a vet involved, obviously, to do that. Once you find out if they're with stones, then it's most common that it's going to be a similar stone to the other goat that you just lost. If it is, and here's where I see tons of bad advice too, if you have calcium stones, you cannot get rid of those with acidifying the urine. So people that tell you once you're trying to help a goat that has stones to drench them with apple cider vinegar or ammonium chloride or any of those things, the only thing you're doing at that point is introducing more moisture, which is making the bladder expand all that much more, and you're going to only help him to die faster. The only thing to do in the circumstance that you have a chance to do is two things. One, which I recommend, which is you actually extract the penis, which is quite difficult, and probably need a vet and a help with a sedative, and then you clip the pizzle. The pizzle, if it's the problem, all of a sudden the urine will come streaming out, stones may come streaming out, make sure you collect them so you know what you're dealing with. But if it doesn't, then it means it's caught in that little notch on the inside and there's nothing you can do about that. The only thing you can do about that is the second process, which these university hospitals and some of the higher level vets will actually go in, they open up the bladder, they clean out the stones, they clean out their urethra, and then they help them to repair. I have seen that procedure help in about 30% of the instances I've seen people do it, and it usually costs around $2 to $3 grand. So it's expensive to do it, and the success long-term for that goat to survive is not super good. So it matters how wealthy you are and whether you want to throw that at it and that sort of thing. But the pizzle is definitely worth trying, but it's also quite difficult to do by yourself. But I wouldn't say in a jam that you don't try. Just know that you have to extract the pizzle. So you can actually sit them on your lap and you hunch them over forward. And what it does is compress kind of the penis in their body. And then you need a hemostat, not this long, but like this long, that you actually reach down and you grab the penis and you pull it out. And then that little thing on the end of it, the pizzle, you clip off. And then if it expels urine, then you're there. So that's kind of the totality of understanding urinary calculi, what to potentially do if you have it. Do not listen to people who are telling you to give them ammonium chloride and drenching and all that different stuff, because you're not going to erode stones fast enough to solve the problem. It can't get there quick enough to do that. They have a very short time that they can have their bladder expanding, and you're only adding moisture to the environment. The only real fix for that is to clip the pizzle and then the potential surgery. But again, if you lose them, make sure you collect the stones so you know how to counteract it. So I hope that you're watching this proactively. That's my wish. Most of you that are probably watching this have either just dealt with the problem or you're dealing with the problem right now. And so I'm sending you prayer because it's a difficult situation to deal with. But please listen to the actual information of how to prevent it with the ones that are still alive and how to make sure that you don't have this problem again. So I hope you find that helpful. That is our goal here at PackGoats.com and here at Ripple Ranch, is to help people to learn more about raising goats. And please remember, I extended this video in its totality because I believe this is such an important topic. Will you please share this with your friends? This is something that wethers absolutely have a miserable death when people don't know how to take care of this problem and aren't educated on it. Please share this video and subscribe, and I do suggest you become a Goat Club member. So Marc Warnke, the Goat Guy, signing out.